famous last words. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Friends Talking Nerdy. This is Tim Jousma, and with me, as always, I have the holiest of holies. I have the Reverend Tracy. How are you doing?
I am doing great, Tim. Another day in paradise of me managing to feel way busier than I probably should for being amidst a pandemic. But yet, here I am managing to feel like I have like a weirdly busy spring break that shouldn't even have changed my schedule at all. But how are you doing?
Doing good. For the folks at YouTube, they can see some of the changes that have happened in the house here. Those changes include a couple of things. One, the good Reverend stopped by here yesterday and donated some podcast equipment that she did not have a use for. So got a professional-looking microphone set up here, which is nice. Have a mixer board and a couple of additional microphones, which will help in the future when the pandemic ends and we really have the appropriate ability to have other people in the same room, doing podcasts. So that'll be good for the future. But I mean, this setup right here, along with the fact that my computer finally came, it's one heck good ending to what has been somewhat of a frustrating week, thanks to Dell and UPS. So the computer I got, one of the best computers I will probably ever own. It's like an $1,800 computer from Alienware. It's a gaming laptop. Like the amount of RAM on the inside, for instance, is like 16 gigabytes. And like on average, a good computer that you would be able to get at like Best Buy is going to have like 8 max on the inside, which of course that could be bumped up too, of course. But most people are only, when they buy it, are only going to get 8. So having all that, having a dedicated graphics card. I was able to play Grand Theft Auto 4 on the computer, so that was awesome. But one thing I will say is while I am going to enjoy the computer, I wouldn't have bought it if I didn't enjoy it. I do being that I have a platform, I'm going to tell people that my experience buying from Dell and dealing with UPS getting it shipped here was not good. And why was it not good? I don't, because working in retail, you hear a lot of people complain and a lot of people get upset and yell. And so I feel that if you are in a spot to where something does happen, you have to have a reason why. And basically it boils down to, while I understand that we are in a pandemic and that things are weird and that things are slowed down a little bit compared to what they normally are, when you have a company like UPS, they have the technology to meticulously track where a device is going to be at all times. And most importantly, they have the ability to send you information as to why a delay is occurring. That did not happen on UPS's part. And being that it was a customs issue, there's also the possibility that, Dell on their end didn't, since Dell owns the Alienware company, didn't do everything on their end probably to make this go as smoothly as possible. I did reach out to both Dell and UPS. They did have some employees that did follow back to me, but like Dell, for instance, when I reached out and said the computer wasn't here, they said, "Oh, we're going to send an escalation to our logistics team." I heard nothing from them until I had the computer in my hands, and then they had the nerve to send a survey. So, and we all know how great surveys are for customer service and how they are appropriately used.
Right.
Yeah, the absolute garbage there. So, I did not have a good experience. I cannot recommend people shopping with Dell. And because of on their website, because of this, they do make good computers. If you have a chance to buy it in the store, by all means do that. Again, I'm not saying don't buy from them, but I just can't recommend. I just can't recommend purchasing with them online, especially because the main reason I got this computer was for school. And if this had been delayed any longer, that would have definitely, made the first week or two of school a lot worse than, it's going to be now. So, yeah, enough of my bitching. I think it was reasonable. There were no name callings. I didn't wish anybody to go to hell, at least on the podcast. So there is that. Yeah. But
you didn't Karen on anybody, right? You didn't demand. I mean, you did try to get an escalation, and that is different than being a Karen. Gonna throw that out there.
Well, I will say this. I do have a very good close friend named Karen, so I don't like using that phrase Karen, just because she is the exact opposite of that. And to me, I don't want to use that as I get what you're, the stereotypical white lady. Yeah,
yes,
I'm not going to be the
stereotypical
stereotypical white lady.
I'm making a reference to a definition that seems to have gone out there. Because see, for me, it's hilarious because that's my mom's name. And we'll leave that just sitting right there at that. So to Tim's friend Karen, please know I do not think that you're a bad person because your name is Karen. However, I do find it extremely amusing that is what that turned out to kind of be defined as. Like it was just silly to me. I think it's funny.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, she gets it. I mean, because if I know anybody that is ripped into those type of people, it's her. So, but it does kind of, and it kind of will go into a topic we'll go into in a couple of minutes here, as well about it's generally it's not a good idea to use terms like that, to that could potentially single people out, so that's why I didn't feel comfortable with that, but because of that. But anyway, enough of me pretending I'll get off my high horse. Let's put it that way.
There are no high horses here, Tim. There is just you and I doing our best to navigate any given amount of topics that just may come in naturally as we banter back and forth. So there's never any hard feelings for me because I know you.
Yeah.
And I know you wouldn't want to make me feel like an asshole. And I had nothing against Karen.
I know. I know that. I just, anyway. Speaking of that, we do have some good news here. Friends of the show, great musicians based out of Texas, Jomo and the Possum Posse, heard an announcement today that they have a new EP coming out called Self Quarantine. They released the video for that first song, and man, it was great. It's the whole premise of the song. It's a breakup song, but the guy, the theme is like, it's not you, it's not me, but I need to self quarantine. And,
Oh, beautiful. Because I wonder how many people, because come on, we've talked about some of the bad habits in our culture, the bad appropriated things in our culture when it comes to relationships and just being able to break up with them. And that really does just make me wonder how many people use the pandemic to break up. I want to know those numbers.
I mean, I think they should really seriously spend some time scientifically finding that out, because this is a unique opportunity in history. The fact that the industrialized world essentially had to, for the most part, shut down. Interpersonal relationships ended up getting all funky and weird. I mean, this is a perfect time to kind of study stuff like this for stress-related purposes, to find out ways that if it ever happens again, we can have tools available to make it a little bit easier. Yeah, big thing about that, though, is making sure Republicans don't stay in office. But
now see, that bums me out, because I know my partner had told me about an interview, because we listen to NPR not really on purpose in the morning. We just have a sunrise alarm clock, and the chimes it has are insanely fucking annoying. So we have it set to a radio station, and we chose NPR since it's normally not loud or anything crazy to wake up to, right?
Yeah.
But they had been talking about a Republican who, I guess he's not running for re-election, and he had said some pretty good things. It was in response to another Republican trying to make it sound like it was Antifa people during the 6th. The insurrection thing. And then this one guy, and he is a Republican. And again, I hate that I don't know his name, because I'm one of those people, there are good eggs on both sides, if I'm going to be honest. And he said, hey guys, we don't need alternate stories here. We were there, we know what happened. Just stop it. So, but I know, all joking aside and stuff, I have some hopes.
Well, I mean, to your point, yeah, I get it. I mean, on the one hand, sure. To be clear, I am not seriously stating that every single person who's a card-carrying member of the Republican Party is bad. But, that senator you mentioned who called out the other one who was spreading false information, you also said that this senator was also retiring. And You don't have. That's kind of the bad thing. It's like these Republicans suddenly get a big set of balls once they're retiring and that have no stake in the game anymore.
Yeah.
And I would love to see Republicans, because again, as we discussed, there will always be disagreements. I'm not looking for a world to where everybody agrees with me, because that will never ever realistically happen. But we have to stand up for what is right, and we have to have, if we don't follow a set of rules to make this country go, then this country's just not going to go. And until I see some Republicans that actually have some courage to stand up to the dark and evil sides of their race, I think they deserve the critique. Until that day, I think the politicians deserve the critique. So also too, that's another thing I want to point out. When I say Republicans, I am specifically referring to the politicians that are in office at federal, state, and local levels. I'm not talking about individual people, because I know, like for me, I vote Democrat, but I am not happy with some of the things that are happening. As usual, as expected, the Democratic Party is the whole. I mean, they love to play defense and they love to grab defeat from the jaws of victory. But it's we got to expect a lot better from politicians. And anyway, let's talk about a good subject though. You've been watching some shows on Hulu. Tell us about it.
Oh yes, because as I mentioned, I wound up just having a busy spring break. I'm actually, one cool shirt I did get to wear for those that are watching. The Shamrock Run is something that happens every year in Portland. I started running it. It was actually my first 8K from being told that I couldn't run at all, and then deciding fuck doctors and what they told me in my teens, and decided to start training. And so that's what led me into running my first 8K, was the Shamrock Run. And so, last year it got canceled abruptly. So my partner and I went and did a ruck. And this year we actually got to sign up as a whole family. Since it wasn't on a specific weekend, we got to do it whenever we wanted. So I actually ran a 5K with my partner, my stepdaughter, and my stepson. So we all got T-shirts. His was clown pants too big. So really sore from all that. And then, we also went on a 10-mile hike, right before my partner had surgery yesterday. So
nice.
we needed some downtime, and so we decided to see what was new on Hulu. And I found 2 shows that I just really wanted to talk about, because they're definitely worth a watch. Number 1 is a History Channel goodness, like the stuff that I used to love from them, not Ancient Aliens, even though that is my guilty pleasure while sleeping, is Ancient Aliens. But The Food That Built America, it is a really awesome show. It goes to show you, you learn how scary it was to eat food in the 1900s when they first started, coming into the cities. It goes into the invention of ketchup and how that became a thing. It goes into Post cereals and Kellogg cereals, which any other drunk history fans know some of the Kellogg story, but this covered way more than that did. It was really good. I had no idea that Post actually stayed in Kellogg's sanitarium and he stole their granola idea. And that's the only spoiler I'm going to give, because it happens early enough on I don't feel bad.
Yeah, John Harvey Kellogg, who created Kellogg's cereal, was a famous Seventh-day Adventist. And when I was a kid, that was the church my dad went to, so we went there by default. So hearing the stories, cornflakes, for instance, cornflakes were invented to prevent masturbation. That's why they were invented, because he thought that a food that didn't have a taste would kind of temper the wild sexual thoughts. Because when you're eating food with sugar in it, of course the first thing that pops to head is I need to have sex right now, because come on. But
what else are you gonna do with all that energy? Cocaine?
I know, right? Yeah, but yeah, there's a great book out there, and they turned it into a movie in the 90s called Road to Wellville, I think, with Anthony Hopkins as John Harvey Kellogg. Dana Carvey was in it. The movie wasn't well received, but I think part of the reason was that people just didn't really believe, the sanitarium in Battle Creek, Michigan, where it started. They would do stuff like oatmeal enemas and all kinds of other just bizarre stuff.
Yogurt, for sure.
Yogurt,
they talked about all of that. Now, they didn't get into the reason cornflakes, because really cornflakes, the flakes were an accidental invent. But like I said, I don't want to get into too many spoilers. But for him, the food was he actually invented granola. is what he invented. And it turned into Post's grape nuts, because that's what Post ultimately stole. But anywho, there's like all sorts of really cool stuff. If you ever watched Founder with Michael
Keaton as Ray Kroc.
Thank you. Yeah. That's right. It's Ray Kroc, the original crook. I have often joked to friends that if any man successfully sold his soul to the devil for a deal, it was him. But it does go into different angles that was different than what the movie portrayed. And I'm going to kind of trust the History Channel and the historians. But I did love the guests that they had on the Food That Built America, because they had Ray Richmond from Man vs. Food, which I love him. I think he's adorable. And then they also had Buddy, who's Cake Boss, the Cake Boss guy. So any of my other, I know you're kind of nodding. I don't know how much food cooking shows you watch, but they're fairly popular in the cooking show realm. So I love that they're in there. There's a bunch of other little personalities sprinkled in there and a lot of historians. Really good stuff. And I love learning fun facts about food. Like, I am now kind of a fan of Hershey's chocolate again. And I am not going to spoil shit about that story, because that is one worth watching that entire. And it's like 4 episodes. I think it's 4 episodes. It might be 6, but they're long though. They're like an hour and a half each. That's the only thing, is like an episode is a little bit of a time commit, but really, really good. Well worth the watch. Very bingeable for anybody trying to kind of get through the last bit of this pandemic. And the other thing that I found that I did not know existed until last night, and I love that I found it. It is a show called Making It.
What's it about?
So naturally, my partner has this surgery that one of the instructions is try not to laugh. So I'm naturally drawn to a reality show featuring 2 of my favorite comedians. Making It is actually a do-it-yourself craft building competition, like creative building competition, that is hosted by Amy Poehler and Nick Offerman. And I love both of those humans. Yes, it is full of puns. You can tell they have a really good time. It's only the 2nd season of it that's out, so I haven't seen the 1st season. So I've just jumped into the 2nd season, so I don't know how long it's going to be on Hulu, and I wanted to bring that up. Anybody looking for something just kind of lighthearted and cool to watch, they make amazing stuff. The Doghouse episode is just phenomenal, what some of them do. Like, it's crazy. But if you're looking for something cute and light to kind of watch and not make you think too much that you can laugh and clap your hands at, Making It is amazing, and it's a lot of silly puns. So it's mostly like kid safe. Amy Poehler says bitches once, and she's literally talking about dogs, so I think that's why they didn't edit it. But it's pretty clean other than that one thing.
Yeah. I mean, I myself, admittedly, I'm probably not going to watch it myself. I think the professor might like that show. I know she likes reality shows like that. I know you and her bonded over like the Great British Bake Off and whatnot.
I cannot wait for Bake Off. I'm like, summer's around the corner, and I'm just waiting for it.
And I did read an article too that since you like food shows, I think it's like a Food Network show called like Top Chef or something like that. This month is going to be starting a new season that's based out of Portland with Portland chefs.
Oh, that's really cool. I mean, I will probably get to enjoy none of these chefs in the time that I'm still here. That's the bummer, is I realized with moving this summer, I'm probably not going to get to eat at any of my places that have survived this. Because there's some places you just can't take out and take home.
Well, I would say don't necessarily think that, because from what I've heard, the professor did some volunteer work at the site where they're giving vaccines and was able to get her own vaccine there. And what she learned is that folks like myself, for instance, I'm like going to be the last on the list in Oregon. That's like by May 1st, I should have my first shot. But from what Aubrey was told is that due to the amount of vaccines that are now out there, thanks to Biden kind of helping bump things up in that, thank goodness, they're having situations to where people like me, who are deservedly so last on the list, because relatively healthy, good age and all that, are going to the website and being told that, hey, we can actually fit you in. So I would say sign up for it, and you have some other issues that may bump you ahead of the list too. So there's a good chance you may have both vaccines before you go, at which point you should be able to visit at least a couple of restaurants, maybe not all.
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually will. That's really worth mentioning because, yeah, part of what Biden signed was that veteran spouses can actually get vaccinated at the VA. So anybody that didn't know that, please have your veteran go. They should know what website I'm talking about, and they can sign you up for that. Because, yeah, now that takes me out of being in your pool. So that's part of why that had that effect. I thought that was really smart. I'm like, well, hell yeah, let us get vaccinated through the VA. And it's what's awesome about them is they just take your information and they will let you know. Like my partner already got part 1 of his, so we're really excited to have already see like that in our home. You know, he's got number 1, and then he's already scheduled for number 2, and now it looks like they're actually going to take care of the veteran spouses too, which is really funny that wasn't like an inherent thing. But you know, getting things passed and getting exceptions, and the VA has their own struggles. I'm glad that there's movement in it. So. Yeah, I guess there's hope yet. I should. You're right. I should be my normal optimistic self and actually have hope.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, there could be any sort of delays that could happen between now and then, but you know, the process is definitely speeding up. So, you know, I'm confident. I would be confident if I were in your shoes that you'd be able to visit a few places. But yeah, let's move the subject here to something that I watched. I briefly talked about it last week, and I just want to talk about the overall experience because I did sit through the whole fucking thing. Zack Snyder's Justice League on HBO Max. I'm gonna, like anything when I give a critique here, I'm gonna start out by saying overall didn't really care for the movie. I knew that was going to be the end result, but you know, due to the history that was involved, the nonsense he had to go through with Warner Brothers, I felt if I could help contribute and make this a success and have him get a little bit of revenge, good. But wow, it was long. I knew initially when they made it, because the only reason this project came into being was due to the pandemic. Warner Brothers didn't have that many new stuff coming out, so they knew they had a lot of old footage from this that wasn't used, so they figured why not? They gave Zack Snyder the money to do it, which is fine, whatever. But they initially had the plan of making it like a limited like mini series, so they were going to split it like each episode would be like 1 hour, but they didn't ultimately do that. They just stuck it all at one, and I thought that there would be like only 3 parts in the movie, but there were 6, and like after the first hour of the movie, it felt like 3 hours had passed. It was so...
that is my least favorite feeling in the world. Like, especially when you're trying to give something a chance that you kind of didn't really have a big interest in giving it a chance, and then it just feels like it's like, oh, okay, great, torture, like just salt in the wound. Let's just make time slow down magically.
That, and just there were some choices too, like they had like Aquaman in Iceland of all places, and then like when he jumped in the water, you know, left a scene, because of course when you have Jason Momoa in a film, you want him shirtless and moist. You know?
Yes. Because you know, we don't still perpetuate objectification of either gender in our movies. Sorry.
Not at all.
I just think it's interesting sometimes with that topic, but I don't want to get too deep into that to that one specifically.
Well, yeah, but that's something we could also bring up on a different episode too. But it is funny that, you know, like, it's okay to make those objectifying comments about Jason Momoa, but if someone said something even a little less compared to what I said about him to like Gal Gadot, you know, then it would be then people would understand, you know, what it is, I guess. But it was long, it was slow. They had a new epilogue that teased movies that will never be made. This experience also kind of showcased one of the big flaws that they had in this, is that he was, from the very beginning with Man of Steel all the way back in 2008, was setting up movies like that were like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in the future. Movies are not books. You cannot do that to an audience, expect them to remember a major scene from a movie that happened 15 years ago, and expect them to necessarily keep that information. Now, with comic book movies, yeah, fans have a lot of fun speculating and all that, but also, when it comes, if you take a look at what Marvel did with their big movies, like the first three phases, they call the Infinity Saga and whatnot, and it's supposedly the whole story of Thanos. But if you really take a look at the whole Thanos storyline, it's not really a story. It's just a couple extra minutes that they add at the end of each film that gets the fans talking. The fans are the ones that invent, how everything could interweave together. Marvel made it clear that when you watch one of their movies, you're going to get a full, complete story there, but they will tease you with something else. Whereas Zack Snyder just went ahead and, I know you're not going to remember this, but this scene, you're totally going to love it 6 years from now. And just, I thought that was a bad thing on his part. Having said that, there were some good elements as well. I mean, visually, Zack Snyder is a great director visually. I mean, even if you don't necessarily like his films, if you see a trailer, you're going to, admire just what he can do with the frame. When I said last week he was the smart man's Michael Bay, that wasn't necessarily a knock, because even Michael Bay, his movies look great. That doesn't mean they are, but they look great. The cast as well. The cast in this movie was done right. I mean, Ben Affleck as Bruce Wayne, Batman, I believe that. Henry Cavill as Superman, I can get behind that. Another good thing, they introduced the villain Darkseid, which the young kid in me who grew up watching Super Friends on TV, I was like, oh my God, it's Darkseid. And, that was cool there. But just overall, it was way too long for my taste. I'm glad that I'm just glad that he got a chance to finally fulfill his vision. He was able to take this horrible experience and kind of end it on a good note. Because at the very end of the film, he kind of gives a little reason why he did it, because he dedicated the Zack Snyder's Justice League to his daughter, who killed herself. Tragically. So do I think Zack Snyder is going to come back and do any more DC movies? Probably not. I'm sure if they shovel a lot of money his way, he's not a dumb guy. I'm sure he would take it. But, just for me, it's just like, it's over with, and it's time to move on. DC has a lot of great stuff in the future coming up. As we record today, the trailer to the new movie The Suicide Squad, directed and written by James Gunn, came out and was really, really well done. And then of course in a couple of years you have the movie The Flash, which is going to star Ben Affleck, Michael Keaton, and Robert Pattinson as Batman in that movie along with Flash. So there's a lot of good stuff coming out. But Justice League, I gave it a shot. It wasn't for me, but if there are people out there that enjoyed it, hey, that's great. You enjoyed a movie. Everybody wins. So
yeah.
Yes. Now.
And meanwhile, I was enjoying that they had The Dark Knight back up on Netflix.
Yes. Well, that's on HBO Max now too.
I think that's why, maybe, because they. So just a side dumb note, my partner and I tried watching The Dark Knight. Like, we were up late one night, right? Mm-hmm. So we paused it, and then we went to go upstairs to continue it, but it had turned over to midnight, and they happened to remove it. So it's taken like a year for me to be able to finish a movie that we really wanted to watch, because Heath Ledger just such a good version of the Joker. I personally would have liked to have seen more of that, but it looks like you have opinions. We might have to do a thing on that sometime.
Well, let's put it this way. I mean, Heath Ledger, when he was alive, his skills as an actor, speak for themselves. He didn't give a bad performance, but, just my age and growing up in the age of when, the 1989 Batman came out with Jack Nicholson, to me, there are two people that have perfectly captured the Joker for me, and that's Jack Nicholson and Mark Hamill. Heath Ledger did a good job. Don't get me wrong, but in my opinion, and it's probably not a popular opinion, I think a lot of the attention that his version of the Joker gets is just simply because of him tragically passing away. I think people I just don't think it's that much of a revolutionary thing. I think, the reason people praise it so much is that being his last role, when you literally go out with a bang, people are going to miss you.
Yeah.
And I'm not making a suicide reference with him. I just realized with that, going out with a bang, he did commit suicide, or no, he died of an overdose. He didn't commit suicide.
Right. It was overdose.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear I was not making a suicide joke there, just with a bang there. That just came to my. I'm sure you probably didn't even think of that. I thought of that, and it's just like I want to make that clear.
Oh, it'd be different. Like, yeah, especially if he had or by gun. But no, I didn't even make that thing. No, I think my joke with him is watching it again and just enjoying the fact that I put together is like this version of the Joker just wanted suicide by Batman. Because of how happy he is when he thinks Batman's actually about to kill him, and then how disappointed he is the minute Batman doesn't kill him. So if you want to watch that and keep that in mind, just enjoy a man who just wanted suicide by Batman. That. That's the weird twist on that version of Joker that I really found enjoyable.
I haven't confirmed, this is just speculation, but what I think one of Heath Ledger's influences more than likely is probably the Alan Moore story, The Killing Joke. In that story, the Joker kidnaps Barbara Gordon, Commissioner Gordon's daughter, has her raped and cripples her. And the whole story is Batman trying to stop him and essentially that. So I think that was definitely part of the inspiration there. But let's move on here. I think this is something that we should bring up. I don't know how much I feel comfortable discussing, I guess, but we do have to acknowledge, the gun violence that we've experienced here within the past week. We had the mass shooting in Atlanta, where you had a number of Asian American women, some of whom may or may not have been sex workers, that were brutally, senselessly murdered. And in Boulder, Colorado, you had a nut job who was able to get a machine gun on the day that a court blocked Colorado's assault weapons ban in court, was able to get that machine gun and then a day later go into a grocery store and kill people. We need gun reform. We need gun reform now. Especially, I think of the poor people in Boulder, especially, but think of the folks in Atlanta too. We're talking service industries, both grocery store and massage industry. Whether you agree with the massage industry, the full body massage industry or not, is irrelevant. They are still giving a service. It is dealing with the public and all that, and it just another light that shines on me that shows that just how much essential workers are treated in this country. They're treated like absolute garbage, and there are more deaths, senseless deaths of innocent people just because certain politicians have a hard-on for the NRA, and let's talk about Atlanta as well, with the Asian women. That even though the police have made a big deal of trying to say that they don't think it's a hate crime. I mean, a white guy in Georgia going to Asian-run businesses and killing Asian people. Come on. It's...
See, that one I honestly haven't read as much about. And I haven't read much about the initial ones either at the massage parlors. Yeah. I do recall hearing, because again, I listen to NPR and snippets, and so they're talking about it a lot in the morning because that's what I get to wake up to. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there were snippets where I thought they had said that there was no, evidence supporting that those massage parlors had done anything like that, but there had been complaints of attempted solicitation by that person. And to me, it's a big wake-up call. Not only do we need gun reform, I personally do think this is also an outcry that we have mental health issues in our society. Now, I am not saying that excuses any racist core or inspiration behind why people did what they did, because I'm sorry, I don't see a well mind justifying hurting anybody for that reason. So that is where I personally, IMHO, my humble opinion style, kind of can't help but agree that this is kind of a sign of a mental health issue with America that I feel like we keep wanting to sweep under the rug, but I just don't think a healthy mind thinks this way.
I mean, it kind of goes in line to something John Oliver talked about on Last Week Tonight the other day, and something we talked about yesterday. The whole idea, and this may not seem like it's the right idea first, but he talked about how you had industries like the bottling companies like Coca-Cola pushing supporting environmental causes, not for the sake of doing good, but for the sake of essentially shifting the blame. And when it comes to mental health in this country, I think a lot of that is the same. I mean, ever since the 80s, Reagan was the first one that severely cut back public funding for mental health services, which ultimately led to rises in homelessness, rises in drug use, people self-medicating, and what the response to that led to a rise in crime a little bit in the 80s. But then what do? They throw a lot of money at law enforcement, and we've seen what's happened there. And just we cannot ignore mental health anymore. It is a public safety issue. I mean, because that, along with having weapons freely available, I mean, there are so many loopholes with gun ownership that even if you do live in a state that has responsible gun laws being that, an average citizen should be able to get one if they wish, but, proper licensing, training, all that stuff should be in place, in my opinion. And like I said, it's like a topic like this. I don't want to get too much into it because it's like there's a lot of stuff that's going on that I don't feel I have the knowledge, I guess, to really ultimately speak on. But I know in this particular case, though, I know what I do feel comfortable speaking on, and that's we do need common sense gun reform in this country. Not a ban of all guns. That's silly. It's unrealistic. That's stupid. People can be responsible with guns, but the current way as it stands is getting people killed. And are we going to continue to let it happen? Because we have so far. But are the Democrats finally going to do something, or is this just going to continue? That, and also support your Asian friends, your Asian brothers and sisters that are out there, your friends. Just stop the hate. When you had a former president publicly calling something a China virus instead of calling it by its proper name, when you have, like in the news today, Trump's former CDC director came out and says that he believes, even though there is no proof whatsoever that this belief has any basis in fact, that the virus came out of a lab in China, accusing the Chinese of germ warfare. I mean, that China may be a lot of things, but they're not dumb either, and I just don't be racist. Don't be racist. Take a deep breath and just we got to be better. And that's I mean, this is another reason why I think talking about it more is probably not a good idea for me, at least, because it'll be a lot of hemming and hawing and stuttering on my part. But this is just sad. It doesn't need to be this way.
And we actually know from I think it was just the prior episode, this is a topic that I know I can get very impassioned about. And but I will say one humble opinion of mine on it is, if a state, like, it's weird to me if you live in a state where you can't register and vote on the same day, but you can, like, within the same day get a gun. And that's where I'll leave that. That's just something that personally, it is something that has always made me go, whoa? Like, excuse me? Why is it easier to get that? But that's one thing that so far nobody has really been able to convince me, like, why that makes sense. But yeah, it is it's a hot topic. Like, it's even saying things like common sense gun reform, like that term together triggers some people, which, no pun intended, but kind of a pun intended there. So it stinks that it's like something that you can't even talk about without worrying about people getting really worked up about. And that's personally why I try to be careful and aware, because I know I'm one of those people that gets worked up, and I don't want to be that person.
Well, that that too, and also I think with this topic, I want to make it abundantly clear that I think that there are people that are far more educated and far more appropriate to be talking on the more nuances of this particular topic. So I think that's part of it too. But just yeah, it shouldn't be a hot topic because every poll I have read indicates that the average person, even the average person who is a card-carrying member of the NRA, believes in common sense gun reform, believes in licensing, believes in background checks and stuff. And it's just simply one small group of really rich people that are abusing their power. I mean, hopefully the SDNY, the lawyers in New York that are essentially going after Trump and have gone after the NRA as well are able to deal some death blows to that organization, because the moment they go away, the better. I mean, I think back to Lethal Weapon. And you're like, why? I listened to the director's commentary of that, and Richard Donner talked about, how the director talked about in the past, he supports, gun usage. He has no problem with gun usage, but he's also wants to be responsible. And he said that in there that, he didn't see the sense in supporting the NRA because he felt they went way too far in the other direction. He thinks that while the gun ownership should be a freedom that people should be able to properly take advantage of, people should do that responsibly. And anyway, like I said, one thing we can do as well, one thing I can do is, and if you know some organizations, we can throw some organizations up on our link tree, some like nonprofits that will have some more information. We can go from there. But
basically we're saying, let somebody else educate you guys. Don't let the gun talk. Don't let us be your only source of education.
Yeah, because too many, and I've been guilty of this before. People are guilty of getting their information from a talking head. Even though we don't have a big platform here, we are a talking head. But we are talking heads that are telling you, go to the source. Don't take what we say because there may be something that I'm not thinking of right now, or I could be saying something wrong. Blah blah blah. But speaking of nonprofits, you got some news to tell us.
Yeah, continuing the saga that is me slowly revealing my busy fucking spring break is really, it's all been leading up, those that don't know that we typically record on a different day. I've just got a bunch of stuff that came to a head today, and it's actually ending with tonight, which will, this isn't going to be coming out until Saturday, so the day after this announcement's going to be made. I am being announced as being an executive board member of a group called the Heroes Circle.
All right.
And I want to go into it just a little bit because it does kind of have to do with the main topic that we wanted to talk about, and even kind of explaining how we're going to talk about that topic. So the Heroes Circle is essentially, it's an alliance of adults who were alienated as kids from one parent. I guess there could be some alienation from both of your parents technically, but most of us were alienated from either our mother or our father at some point. And it's really kind of amazing because we have kind of a voice in it that doesn't have we're not trying to win anything. We're not trying to get custody and say, parental alienation is real because, and then the result of somebody believing me is going to get me something. That's not where we're at all. We're actually trying to build a little bit of a community and talk about healing and talk about what this did to us in our lives. So now a lot of us are adults enough that we can have our own voice, and we've decided to come together and work towards making that happen. I'll probably post a link. Most of our Facebook Live events are obviously available after. We're going to talk about some of the programs and stuff. So I will be prepared to do that this evening, and instead of regurgitating it twice, I will leave it at that. And then as far as it goes, going into our main topic of Allen versus Farrow, which is something that Tim and I both watched. So when we both watch something, we tend to like to talk about it on here, of course, because it gives us content for you folks. But since we had two very different reasons for watching it, as I was kind of looking for a specific topic to be covered, and Tim had actually stumbled on it before I had learned about watching it for my own personal reasons and stuff to do with other stuff. So I kind of was hoping or going for Tim's going to lead a lot of it on what kind of his overall interpretation. And then there's some things that I did really want to speak out about that were mentioned specifically in this documentary that, I will always say you are free to do research. I never expect anybody just to drink my Kool-Aid because I say here it is, but there were some things that were said at some point that I know I wanted to address. But for the most part, I wanted to kind of respond and be more conversational and not accidentally get on like a rant.
Same disclaimer as for the topic before. Yeah, there are going to be some topics that we will strongly recommend you go to other sources as well. Obviously Tracy has a lot more expertise on the matter, but this is just kind of reacting more than anything to Alan V. Farrow. But this is like, if thinking back for me, I think this is like the first huge celebrity scandal that I remember as a kid. Obviously there were some beforehand, but it's like Woody Allen, comedian in the 60s, also did some work writing for TV shows like Your Show of Shows, which people like Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner worked on. Got famous as a stand-up, did lots of talk shows in the 60s, and then in the 70s started dabbling in movies. In the early 70s, his movies were more traditional comedies. Like as a kid, I do remember watching the movie Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex, but we're afraid to ask, from Woody Allen, which was even now was pretty funny at the time, even though I won't watch it again, because they had a scene to where the scene was a man and a woman are in a car, they're making out, and then they have sex, but you get the point of view of the man's sperm and his of his inside parts and whatnot. Like Alan and somebody else play like actual sperms, and then they have like Ride of the Valkyries playing when the guys ejaculate, and they're jumping off. Funny stuff. I mean, funny's funny, but in 91, 92, word came out from Woody Allen himself that he was leaving his longtime lover, Mia Farrow, leaving her for her adopted daughter, Soon Yi. Soon Yi, at the time of the press conference, was a young woman in college, but as the facts came out, the public came to learn that he knew her far longer than that. Knew her when she was a kid, when he and Mia met, and also, there was accusations from Woody Allen's adopted daughter, Dylan Farrow, both at the time in 91 and then, in recent years as well, that he molested her. And what this documentary series ultimately is, it's telling Dylan's story primarily. And it's, like I said last week, this documentary is, I don't think this documentary is going to change any minds. If you came in believing Woody Allen, you're not going to believe a word anybody says. If you came in believing Dylan Farrow, nothing's going to change your mind that Woody Allen may have an explanation, but I don't think it was necessarily, for the primary part, was necessarily intending to try and sway your opinion. For me, the important part, the reason why I felt it was important to watch this was a survivor finally getting the power to be able to tell her story about a rich and powerful man who just happened to be her father, which molested her. And that to me, that ultimately was the important part, because Woody Allen successfully throughout ever since this first started, Woody Allen was able to successfully get the public on his side. Mia Farrow, apart from the movie Private Parts from Howard Stern, she has not done an American film that I am aware of since then. So as far as American film, she's been blackballed, even though, look at her history. I mean, Rosemary's Baby, anybody? I mean, and look at her work in Woody Allen movies, Hannah and Her Sisters, for instance. I mean, she is a great actress, but the documentary also did kind of do some minor psychological work, I guess you can say, on Woody Allen. What I mean by that is this: they discussed his older movies. Like one movie in particular they discussed was Manhattan. Manhattan came out, I believe, in '79, and the basic premise of the story is that a comedy writer who's 44, my age, was dating a 17-year-old girl. And it was presented in the movie as just, it's just cool. She's dating her. She's 17. She's not 15. That would be wrong. I mean, just
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's for me. So to something that you kind of said before, and I guess where my opinion on the documentary would be interesting is I really didn't know much about it. Like younger than you, and I just am not really somebody who's traditionally been in a lot of touch with that. My family didn't follow a lot of it, and so I just kind of didn't. I come from farm country background. We watch Nick at Night sometimes, and then we just didn't really get too into the Hollywood news stuff. But I did remember the jokes on him when he was dating Soon-Yi, and that's all I remembered. So it was interesting for me. And then also something that I'm open about is I went through a lot myself as far as traumas and sexual shit as a kid myself. So it is really good to watch somebody tell their story. And it was interesting for me, and there were parts that were really hard to kind of listen to for me.
Well, let's go into that. Into that, because I had some problems with the documentary. As far as the Dylan Farrow story in and of itself, I think they did good, but they went into some other areas that really, really irked me. And that's the problem with documentaries overall. The big thing that irked me is a topic that you know a lot about, and that's the parental alienation topic. And what bothered me is this. I think it was like the third or fourth episode. They had a woman. I forgot the woman's name. I think you know the woman I'm talking about. Who
I think it's the Myers Papers. Is that the lawyer? Okay, yes.
It may have been. Yeah.
I forget her full name. She's just not lodged in my memory banks. But yes, that Meyer, I think, is how you say her name. She was interviewed on there too. She spoke briefly.
Yeah, and she was also on the podcast, the Compendium podcast. There is an Alan V. Farrell podcast that we found at the last minute, but I did get through the 3 episodes. But her main point was that she discussed that after the custody battle in court, there was a rise in people using the parental alienation defense, and the documentary went out of their way to not be as honest as they could have been about the parental alienation topic. I know you took some notes about the whole idea of parental alienation, about the guy who originated the idea. So fill folks in on that.
So there were a few things, and honestly, so to circle back to the Circle of Heroes, we're actually part under another one called Victim to Hero, which does have a website, and there are actually links there that you can read about the Myers Papers and some of the stuff that was referenced in the documentary. So that information is out there. I'm not going to try to regurgitate it because I think I sent you the link as an interesting read, but it is a little bit of a read. Yeah. But this is definitely a topic I'm going to kind of insist almost that if you want to have strong feelings about it, research it, understand it, and know how you feel about it. But what really irked me was some of the stuff that was said about Gardner, specifically like in the documentary, because she had said something. I was pretty sure she said that none of his publications have been peer-reviewed. And that's not true. I actually went and found Richard Gardner passed away. He killed himself. He was a suicide in 2003, actually. Oh, wow. And I don't know all the details of that. I've more recently learned about Gardner. Right. So it was kind of interesting because I found a website where he did respond to some of these things. And with him dying in 2003, you have to keep in mind these things were written before 2003. Yeah. And so the fact that this was claimed, if I felt like I got like a weird side eye from you. I really thought that she had said something about his stuff not being peer reviewed. But I didn't go back and rewatch this documentary 10 times, guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't, neither did I, but I don't recall her specifically saying that, but she was definitely condescending about it, and which was the big thing that irked me about that is this, with the medical profession, and just like we spoke yesterday, the medical profession, or I may have discussed this with a professor, but that's a different story. The medical profession, like the legal profession, is very conservative. They don't make changes on a whim. That is including in a psychological profession. That is including updating the DSM, as you've mentioned before. They're not going to add new entries on a whim. There is an entire long process that is gone through to study each and every proposed new potential entry of the DSM. And a lot of times these things take time. What they were implying in the show, what I did not like at all, was the fact that because it's not in the DSM, it must be junk science. That is what I took from that, and that is not the truth. I mean, we're talking about, from what I gleaned from the documentary, we're talking about the parental alienation syndrome from Dr. Gardner, I guess, was kind of introduced in the 90s. If I'm not, it may be the 80s, but the 90s, and that's for a mental health issue, that is still something that is relatively new and young. Again, these things take time. And during that time, there will be tests that will be done. There will be studies. There will be adjustments. And I'm sure there have been adjustments to the parental alienation syndrome thing from when it was first introduced to where it is now. And just like 20 years from now, I'm sure there will be some more studies that have come out, some more news, and there will be some more adjustments, because that's how the psychological profession works. That's how the medical profession works. That's how the law profession works. When you have a documentary that is doing little tricks like this in terms of tricking the audience into thinking something that is that's a lot more nuanced than how they're presenting it, that's dirty pool. That's dirty poker. That's not fair. That's not right. And that's manipulating your audience into getting an opinion when it's not true. I mean, that's no better than what Michael Moore has done over the years.
Yeah, and he's caught a lot of public scrutiny for doing kind of the same level of cherry picking and the same level of presentation.
Yeah.
But the official response that, Dr. Gardner had on none of his, and there is some difference between, I guess, parental alienation and parental alienation syndrome. That could honestly probably be like its own topic of actually going into what that is. That was where I didn't want to derail too much of talking about the actual documentary that we watched.
Right.
But his response was, at the time that he wrote this response, 15 of his publications regarding parental alienation syndrome, because that is what he dealt with. So he had said 15 of his PAS publications had been published in peer-reviewed journals, and at that time 3 more were being worked out to also be published in peer-reviewed journals. So anybody who, I guess, had picked up on that, the claim that junk science, not peer-reviewed, that's not true. And again, please feel free to research this yourself if for some reason you found something else that contradicts, that. But the other part was there was this implication that he was really sympathetic or pro-pedophilia. And he's responded to that in a lot of ways. There was actually, again, on this same question and answer of him responding to some of these misconceptions or misinformations about him. There were a few different phrases around pedophilia, because he got a lot of flack for how he described it. Let me see, it was something about how he's not saying that everybody does it, but he wasn't trying to normalize it and saying that it's okay. There was a lot of how he described it. I was oh, he's explaining it away and saying that it's a normal part of society.
Yeah.
No, he still thinks that it's bad for society, that it's not a good thing. But some of the ways that it was explained has been kind of that he's saying it's just a normal thing, and it's no. It's right up there with people murdering and arson and other it's not good.
Yeah, I mean, also too, he was a doctor. He was explaining things in a doctorly way, and that's not necessarily something that is going to translate well to the casual person, which allows for documentaries to be able to cherry pick because the average person is not understanding necessarily the context of what this person is actually saying. So, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
But his official opinion, his words, because that's what I wanted to take, was his words as much as possible. He says, I consider pedophilia to be a form of psychiatric disturbance. Furthermore, I consider those who perpetuate such acts to be exploiting innocent victims with little, if any, sensitivity to the potential effects of their behavior on their child victims. Many are psychopathic, as evidenced by their inability to project themselves into the position of the children they have seduced, and ignore the potential future consequences on the child of their I can't say the word. Bad behavior. Just not good. Abominable. There we go. Behavior. My brain was just not going to say that, guys. So I'm not going to try that again. So I'm just going to apologize that came out as what it was. But so talking about something being something that happens in society is not the same as permitting it. It is not the same as saying it's okay. Yeah. I've talked about a lot of my personal experience in life. I had a lot happen when I was younger. I'm not saying that because I talk about it that I'm saying it's okay. I'm not saying let's talk about it because this happens to people. That doesn't make it okay. It's really more about, to me, untabooing the topic so that we can actually get into it and maybe stop it from happening.
And that's another thing too. I mean, that did make me upset about that woman in the documentary because, and the documentarians themselves, because when they talked about the rise in people using parental alienation as a defense in court, the clear implication was by matter of omission, by not talking about it, the clear implication was that anybody using the parental alienation must be wrong. And again, it's we've talked, absolute statements are not true because that comment that they made in that document, that little part about the rise, they bring that up implying that anybody who brings that up is wrong, when in the first episode they talked about 2 to 10% of the kids are caught being coached on being molested by someone else. And is that not a form of alienation if we're talking about, a mother that is saying that their kid was molested by a father, and it turns out that's not the case? That is alienation. And if people are getting caught doing it, you got to figure that there are people that have successfully done it. Now, in the podcast, the woman did have some clarifications, which I will point out, and which do make some sense here. And that's, one, when it comes to kids, it is hard to coach them. And I get that. But again, just because something is hard doesn't make it impossible. And just like I said, I just find it extremely disingenuous that they said that, because it undercut it undercut their credibility. It was a cheap lie. And if you're going to be undercut on that, that's especially when you have a very clear-cut case like the Woody Allen situation here. I mean, the evidence clearly shows this guy did it. This guy did it. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Because that was something I didn't like about it. And I know we had talked a little bit whenever I came to drop off goodies. Mm-hmm. And the microphone that he talked about earlier, in case you guys forgot. But when I dropped that by and we were talking about, I didn't like how there was almost this sense of implied agreeance that if you believe Woody Allen lied about it, then you must also believe that any time it is used, it is a lie. But I do think it's funny that you were talking about, she spoke in absolutes, because it just takes me back. Let's nerd out about that statement in a second. Only the Sith deal in absolutes. So I I had to just to lighten it up. It's a heavy topic, so I'm gonna try to keep it a little bit light, guys. What can I say? But yeah, like to me, my ears perk anytime there's an absolute, because that immediately, a Mabel-ism from Gravity Falls here, my skepticals go up. Whoop, skepticals. So yeah, like there was that I really didn't like, because it's sad, because when that came up, that made me feel like I didn't want to believe Dylan because of that. And now I am very glad that in the 4th episode they talked a little bit more about coaching, because I want to be clear about that coaching statement. I'm not sure I agree with kids aren't easy to coach as that period statement. Now, when the people went in, the specialists that are like nowadays very educated scientific specialists, and they were breaking down the body language, and they were saying like the way that Dylan told the story, that is really hard to coach, like where she reenact, because kids tend to reenact when they're telling something. So I'm not sure I can agree with kids aren't easy to coach, but I will say that helped me bring it back to where I was allowed to have different opinions again of parental alienation versus Dylan's story, is when they brought those specialists back and they were talking about the physical, her reenacting. And then that brought my attention to, wait a second, you don't have to feel that alliance just because the documentary seems to kind of portray it in that way. And because like I said, going into it, I didn't know. And something that I had told you when I first started watching this is, and it's something that I've even struggled with turning in, abuses that I suffered as a child. These happenings inherently have no proof. It's like there's not a lot of people that have a witness. There's not a lot.
This one did though.
Well, this one with again, it goes into children, like the But there wasn't like a nanny cam setup that caught it as like a third perspective that could be like, oh yeah, definitely not coached, because there's like this other very factual way of proving it, which I got kind of some comfort in what they talked about, is that we know enough about like physical body language that we can look for that. But where this plays out sometimes, not those specialists, I'm hoping, are being brought in to understand the ways to kind of tell, like where it's a possibility that a story has been coached versus an impossibility of it being coached, by actually really observing the child telling the story. Yeah, the absolutes thing definitely like really threw me off, because it's there's different absolutely bad.
It's bad, and I think the woman in question was, as you mentioned, was a prosecutor, and one thing we do have to keep in mind, that just because a prosecutor is putting charges against a defendant of some sort doesn't mean that prosecutors always doing the best job. There are numerous instances in history of prosecutors that bend the rules in order to get a guilty person in jail, and this person may have very well have done something bad, but if the prosecutor's not following the rules, or you have a prosecutor that is blind to the fact that something like parental alienation does exist. Now, I think it's, to the woman's point, I think when it comes to parental alienation, from what it sounds like, she's upset that there are some people that are able to use that defense, and apparently, according to her, then the judge would automatically just say, well, it must be happening, and go from there. And then women are the implication being that women are losing custody of children over this, and over accusations of parental alienation, when it's hard to prove this stuff. But I think there is a discussion that can be had about creating a situation to where people can be safe to bring these accusations. These accusations can be properly vetted and see if they are legit or not, and then go from there. If they are legit, prosecute. If they are not legit, and you find that there is definitive proof that one parent is trying to plant lies in a kid's head to falsely accuse the other parent of doing something, then I have no problem with prosecuting that parent. But let's talk about the different types of parental alienation as well, because if parental alienation is more than just a parent, tricking a kid into thinking molestation happened. It could be something like my experience growing up. My mother ripped into my father a lot and made it the clear implication that anytime I agreed with him, then I must be against her. Once I became an adult and learned what type of father my human was, I found out she had very good reasons for thinking the way she does, but she handled it wrong. And yeah, so you're part of this group. Fill us in more about what parental alienation could potentially be.
Well, I mean, that's a really good one, Tim. And we do cover that topic a lot. Like they have so many specialists and stuff. And they're the main one, Victim to Hero. They do bring on people and have some really great interviews. So if you're ever curious to go through their history of videos, that is really where I would start as far as really, really learning more. Something that I like to talk about and feel very comfortable is at least my experience as well. And it is, again, that little bit, I mean, they say it is a covert style of abuse, no matter how overt the action is.
Yeah.
Because, we have people, other adults who legit were skipped from state to state. Some of them were even taken by the non-custodial parent and then gone off, and there's name changes involved and things like that. There's, people that are even in other countries that deal with this too. And I would much rather put those stories back to the voices that they came from. There's actually a series of interviews that have been done through Victim to Hero where we've talked specifically to children. Even my interview is up there, so maybe I'll share that one on our page, just so there's my story and some of the questions that I got asked. But,
nice.
To me, there's even covert and overt versions of alienating a child. And so obviously, overt is that definite, they're moving them around, they're changing their name. There's very dramatic and heartbreaking and gut-wrenching stories out there. And then there's kind of what happened to me, which is that kind of socially acceptable way of doing it. At the time anyway, because let's be fair, I was in the test batch of divorced kids. I'm currently working on a book where I try to talk about this, where I was kind of an odd little exile. I was in small town Texas, and so we were known as the blank kids. I'm not going to go into my maiden name and crap like that, so you guys can try to lock into my bank account or whatever. But no, just kidding. But I don't do anything that obvious. But we were those kids. We were the kids of that divorced woman, and that was very much part of my identity for a while. And for me, my parents divorced at a very young age. And where my mom did kind of talk her feelingly acceptable level of trash. I mean, it was never so overt to tell me I wasn't allowed to agree with my father ever. It wasn't anything like that. Yeah. It was really, really small things over time, but it didn't really get bad until we moved away. And there was something about, it's not like now. I couldn't just pop up a screen or send a text to him and be like, hey, Dad, I'd like to see your face, and then be on FaceTime or Facebook, and able to see him. It was a very different time to be moved away physically. Yeah. And before then, I was just kind of able to see him when I wanted. We were famous for just swinging by Dad's after school, because back then we just walked home from school. The bus didn't take us home. It's if you were within a walking, couple of miles radius, you were just on your own to get to and from school back in where I was from. So, I noticed it got a little bit strained after we moved, but there were years that it's almost definition of the signs that Gardner had laid out. I had a really close relationship with my dad. And then it turned into, I mostly got, my mom in my ear about him. And it's I remember her talking about oh, he was a drunk, and oh, he cheated on me, and kind of those little seeds. And then when we finally had the fight that was good enough for her to kind of get in there, that was what led to me not seeing or speaking to him for, I think it was 2 years, but it was a very important time for me, because then a lot of other bad things happened during all of that. Right. There's jokes about daddy issues, right? And I've even joked about like my daddy issue past in some ways, and even in some of my stand up, I joked about pointing at all my tattoos. That's where I wear my daddy issues. But
Reminds me of that Family Guy bit where Quagmire was giving dating advice and says that he's the type of guy that would go to a bar, ask a woman about her dad, and if she had anything positive to say, he would move on to the next one.
And it's oh man, because there's fathers' rights groups that are also really on this conversation about parental alienation. But I guess what's kind of nice about the group that I'm working with is. And it's not, I love the fathers' rights people. There's also a lot of women in that organization. And I was spinning up actually to start volunteering with them up to the beginning of the pandemic. And then there was just something I was like, I don't know, this isn't quite the right fit. And that was where I was really grateful to stumble into this opportunity with the Heroes Circle, because I really wanted to work with a demographic that I felt comfortable with. And for me, it's been more about the children's rights of the whole situation. So children deserve for this to be recognized, because when you look into kind of, what kind of happens when you've broken a bond with a parent, especially when you were close, you had a great relation. I was such a daddy's girl. I mean, I ate jalapeno peppers just of sheer stubbornness because my father ate them. And, I just wanted to he was my hero, and then one day he just wasn't anymore. And if you think that doesn't have a horrible effect on a small human, I mean, just think about that for a minute. Like, can you really think that wouldn't have a really detrimental effect? And then personally, in my life story, I just kind of feel like that's where things got really hard for me. When suddenly I just didn't have a dad anymore. I just had a father that was somewhere. He very much became like the sperm donor type conversation. And so, and I don't hate my mom, by the way. Like, let me throw that out there. I have kind of gone through some repair with all of that, because I really honestly don't think she, knew what it would kind of have an effect with me in the long run. And at the time, I think she was just desperate to have a close relationship with her daughter. And it was kind of that feeling that there's there was a loyalty kind of bind there that she wanted to create, I guess. But also just that feeling that love is some finite material that you can only have so much of. And in a way, I kind of get the temptation. I'm not trying to make excuses for her. It's just mostly that's my choice in processing. I am not going to judge anybody who never wants to talk to the person again or whatever. But I don't come from a place where I want to be angry at people forever because of what happened. And that's my choice in processing. But I don't think that she realized what she was doing was kind of abusive to me. It really hurt in a long, very lasting way. And that's what deserves recognition. It absolutely matters. For me personally, I want to see more non-rebutable 50-50, which is just basically when you divorce, it's just assumed that unless you work it out for something different, that 50-50 is going to be the default if you can't work something out, which is great because it actually does give parents an opportunity to try to talk. If there's a guy that he's always working night shifts, or let's not be sexist, or even the mom could be the one working the night shift job and all the time and not necessarily being able to provide as much childcare as the other parent could, and it could be worked out. And that's the thing, is we kind of want to take the gender away from it in that sense. Any parent can be alienated against. Yeah, it's not there is kind of a lot of fathers because of the stereotype, but there are also a good amount of mothers out there, and their voice deserves to be heard in all of this. But so parental alienation, there's a lot of information out there, and if you are an adult alienated child, and you would like to kind of become part of this group, I'm just going to say you can either reach out to me. I'm probably going to put some links to the Heroes Circle. We have a Facebook support group and stuff too that I help moderate. So let's talk about this. Because again, I'm not saying it's okay what happened. Yeah. It is not okay what happened. It absolutely sucks. But it kind of, to me, falls under the it's okay to not be okay, but we need to maybe talk about it so that perhaps we can maybe help future generations and even lead to some healing for ourselves. There's a lot of us kids, as many mothers and fathers out there that don't understand why what happened to them happened to them. there's also a lot of kids that are now adults that don't understand why what happened to us.
Yeah. And that's my big fear with this documentary, with how they dealt with the topic of parental alienation. Not only is it going to give Woody Allen supporters fuel that they need to kind of say, well, then if you can't believe this, then all of this can't be true. It's to all of the people that have suffered due to parental alienation. I mean, it's again, like I said at the start, it's a complicated topic. There was no way we were going to be able to adequately talk about the entirety of this topic to any sort of articulate degree. So to Tracy's point, we are going to do our absolute best, whether it's on our Facebook page or Twitter page or Linktree, to have information for you to go to, because that's what you should do. You don't believe us just because we say it. So we'll put those links up there. Still recommend you watch Alan V. Farrell. It was definitely a well done documentary, and listen to the companion podcast, because they do have some extra like interview footage that they don't have in the show that they played, including I told you about it. The third episode has some extra Dylan footage from when she was a kid, audio, and that made me tear up just hearing her talk about it, because the kid was torn up and was just like, basically saying, why did he do this to me? I'm his daughter. And, hearing that, anybody that has morals, would break down and cry. But, I hope.
To me, that's the thing that stunk about, because we talked more probably about PA than they, like, it was the way that it got stuck in there, and it just distracted from otherwise what needed to be a different story. Just the way for me just the way the topic was jammed in there, to me, it almost made it about something different. Whereas I thought primarily I was going to be watching a documentary about
her
Dylan
story.
Telling her story and about that. And so by sticking in this kind of really controversial topic, and kind of what I feel is a very controversial view about said topic, kind of distracts from what is really, I think it was beautiful. Other than that, I think it's amazing that she feels so comfortable is to tell her story, like, for what it is, like, with her face showing. There's a difference between writing about it and actually putting your face and telling that. So to not distract from that at all, it is totally worth watching. And I, like I said, I have an issue with he said, she said stories. But by the end of it, I really loved how they brought in other specialists and kind of talked about, like, this is how we can tell this is not a coached situation. So really dug it. I overall liked it. That was the only part that I just felt really took me out of me going, this is like one of the best documentaries. Because to me, that weird, like, I don't want to agree with you, so it makes me not want to agree with any of it. But that's just something that you got to fight in your own animal brain sometimes with stuff, I think.
But that's the problem. Not many people do that fight. A lot of people just, I saw it on TV, so it must be true. That's how we got Donald Trump in office, But just, we're talking about kids here, and I think people need to get out of this territorial aspect. When you are parents, you are both, unless one parent is just so outrageously bad at their job, you are both working at trying to do your best to raise another human life to be the best possible, most productive person of society that they could possibly be. And the more roadblocks we put in place for that, the more we instantly have courts give custody with no real choice whatsoever to women, and not let men have more of a say in the process. We're going to have more stuff like this. So that's another reason why it's important to watch this. It's just, again, my fear is that one part is going to be the one sticking point that is going to cause people to really question a lot of other stuff in that documentary. And I think that is going to be a rather big shame.
And that's where I'm really glad that, Victim to Hero is around, and now we're going to have the Heroes Circle. There's going to be more discussion about this, and I don't want to turn Friends Talking Nerdy into Friends Talking PA. Like, that's not my plan. I do want to kind of keep things nerdy here, but just so you guys know, like, that's a lot of the stuff that I work on in the background. I want to be clear about my story. I want to encourage people to tell their story. I want to get this topic back on the table. So it'll be interesting because Meyer, something to take with a grain of salt. Joan Meyer, which I just went to look it up because I didn't want to say this, but without it actually being true, because I did remember that she was a domestic violence lawyer. Mm-hmm. So part of how I take some of that is making a case against something as a lawyer is different than proving whether or not it actually is something that affects psychologically. And there's actually arguments out there that just because it's not in the DSM does not make it unreal. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping soon that maybe we'll see a change to that. I know that's something that people feel that they want to be covered is this thing. Because I don't understand how you can say that gaslighting an adult is totally possible, but gaslighting a child is not.
Yeah, I mean, it's when we're talking about a very specific instance of a parent essentially implanting memories in a kid's head, then that's one thing. But that to compare that one specific instance and say that encompasses the entirety of parental alienation, that's disingenuous. That's at best. And just I hope this again. I hope the documentary doesn't cause more harm than good. I mean, because there is a lot of good that comes from it. I mean, hearing from Ronan Farrow, Dylan's sister, hearing him open up about how, there was a time to where he believed his sister, but he didn't want her talking about it. And then, once she finally wrote that opinion piece that went in Vanity Fair in 2014, breaking down, apologizing to her. I mean, just, and then knowing his work with taking down Harvey Weinstein. I mean, just, the Farrow family. I mean, Mia Farrow has raised some good kids, and it's, and if there's one person I also feel very, very sad for in all this, it's Mia Farrow. Just, hearing how she dealt with this abuse because she felt that, as a mother who has a lot of kids, who would want to date me? Who would want to date Mia fucking Farrow? I mean, just
and that's a very sad way to get into situations like that because I mean and I don't want to say that you should have seen the signs, but whenever you go back through and you hear some of the stuff that he had claimed even early in their relationship, I'm like, okay, now I don't really think he's that good of a person. Even though, going back, I was talking about this on my hike the other day. I was like, I honestly don't even know what Woody movies I've seen. I always knew who he was, but I really just never knew that much about him. And so that was also interesting. So for anybody out there who always knew the name of Woody and didn't really understand anything else, it's kind of interesting to be like, oh, here's all these movies and stuff, and to still just nod and be like, I have seen none of these.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how much I've supported him or not, but I guess he's not really doing much in America anymore. Now it's all of his stuff's just kind of releasing, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I don't know how much I want to follow it, but it'll be interesting to see if he tries to do anything about this.
Yeah, I mean, there is word that he is contemplating legal issues, but basically the big part, from what I understand, is that he was upset that they used clips from his audiobook in there. But with documentaries, there's actually been some legal cases about documentarians using footage like clips from an audiobook or TV shows, and documentarians have a lot of the law on their side to be able to do that. So I don't think. He may go ahead and do that, but I don't think it will be successful. And also, too, on the flip side, I don't think HBO or Warner Brothers would put it out if there was a chance of them potentially losing in court. So, so he may be able to try it, but also, too, he also said in clips in the audiobook that, people that believe him are already going to believe him. People that don't believe him are already not going to believe him. I don't think this is really going to affect him, apart from, some actors and actresses now won't work with him, but he's still making movies too. You still get like Diane Keaton of all people. She was Annie Hall. Annie Hall was his first big Woody Allen movie, and she still very much is a friend and supporter. So there is that. And so I don't think much is really going to happen. I think a lot of it would be just celebrity gossip, tabloid stuff. But again, why would I support, this documentary when it comes to giving power to victims? You have to give that power to them, and especially when the person that we're talking about, the perpetrator, is someone who has the power that he had. That needs to be fought against. People with power that abuse it to that level, just they need to have their lives ruined. I'm sorry, they do. Is it going to happen? No, he's going to die a very rich man, and that's going to be the sick part about this. But
then Reverend Tracy's perfect utopia would be that they would at least get like mandatory psychiatric help, like lock them away by all means, but like don't just put them in a cell. Like do stuff to fix things. And and you can't. God, even Story of God. Like I talked about watching that a long time ago, and the episode that Morgan Freeman did, like trying to understand evil, and he went in and talked to a guy that like had abducted, beaten, raped, women, and they actually talked about doing brain scans. And his brain does not work right here. So I'm just saying, like, maybe we could start with some of those tests and actually try to assess, is this something that this human could actually, like, I know people aren't big fans of success stories for some reason, but is this somebody who can legitimately be kind of going through therapy and become a better version of themselves? Or is this somebody who there might actually be something like physically wrong with how their brain works? And there is a difference between those humans. Yeah. That is definitely one of my probably most unpopular opinions, but that's my unpopular opinion. I'm not scared to share it. I'm open to having discourse about it, though.
Unless we're talking like a Jeffrey Dahmer level of criminal, I don't think I believe people can and do change all the time, and I believe we as a society, do need to make sure that there are consequences for actions, but two, it makes economic sense to rehabilitate these people as best as we can. That means reinstating college in prison. We need to get rid of some of these laws that make it to where they have to announce on their application to Burger King that they're a felon, which prevents them from getting a job. Yeah. We have to give them the right to vote again. And again, that's not excusing their behavior. Because when you do something wrong and you get caught and you get punished for it, you are doing your time. If you do your time, you shouldn't have to be continually punished for the rest of your life, especially if you have shown that you have made steps to make amends. Now, having said that, like O.J. Simpson's, for instance, if he magically came out and says, I did it, I wouldn't expect, like the Nicole Brown Simpson's family or Ron Goldman's family to be, well, okay, come on over, we'll have breakfast. They're still going to hate him, rightfully so. The people you hurt if you do something wrong have every reason to hate you for the rest of your life. Society as a whole, however, should do what they can to help rehabilitate this person, because if we can rehabilitate them, make sure that after they get out of prison, they're able to be gainfully employed and doing whatever, that helps everybody out. That's going to make it to where they're not going to have to contemplate becoming a criminal again because they have no other choice. That's what happens to a lot of these people.
Yeah. You need to kind of incentivize rehabilitation some. Like if there's never a point where you're done being punished, well then what incentive do you have? But honestly, that really could be a topic on itself, the whole ban the box topic and talking about like how we essentially openly discriminate against people, like, and that's not cool. Like it's hard from getting a job to even getting a place to live. Yeah. So yeah, that can honestly be its very own episode if we want to dip our toes into that one, because that's a big topic.
on next week's episode.
Maybe. I mean, I know we were kind of talking about getting, we've been a little bit more mental health. What's funny about this, guys? So if you've been following us this month, we've talked about gaslighting, we've talked about trigger taming and all sorts of stuff. And we had no plan for it to lead up to talking about this documentary. But I think this month is almost its own really neat package of conversation. And so, I'd like to move on to other stuff too. And really, that's more of a social justice topic. So maybe we could move on to social justice. I also wanted to see if I could get my friend to come in and be a nerd about, gems and crystals and stuff sometime.
Well, that'd be cool. Yeah, definitely do that. Definitely do that. And we'll decide what we're going to talk about next week. But most importantly, this coming Wednesday, the Battle for State Supremacy 2 will be here. When the episode drops at the end of it, you, the audience, will get a chance to determine which person, myself representing the state of Michigan, the good Reverend representing the state of Texas, or the professor representing the state of Tennessee, is able to properly defend the music heritage of their state. And the winner will get to choose a movie that the other two will have to watch and comment on. So definitely excited for that. Anything else you want to bring up before we wrap it up?
Oh, absolutely not. I'm excited about the list that I actually did good. They were mostly mine and then a couple of friends' suggestions because I wanted to mix it up. Yeah. But I am really excited about defending the state that I ran the hell away from. So, because I'm pretty sure I've talked about that. That I'm just goodbye, Texas, and good riddance. So I actually think it's really funny that the challenge is me defending the state that I'm GTFOing. But there's actually some good music from there, and there's some really, you guys, if you listen to any of the music reviews, I really love the story behind songs, so it was really kind of fun to go in and nerd out about stuff because that's what we like to do here. So
damn right,
I hope you guys listen to that one. It'll be fun.
It'll definitely be fun. So tune into that. Tune into us next Saturday as well for our new episode. Follow us on social media. If you go to the show description in your podcast player of choice, click on the Linktree link, and that will bring you to not only other places that you may listen to the podcast, because I know I do bump around between a couple of different podcast players, but it will also have our social media links there as well. And, I think this will be curated throughout the week, but we'll have some more links as well when it comes to parental alienation up there as well. So, with that, I think.
I don't mean to interrupt. It's just that last thing is I will always encourage people, please research. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know everything. That's just not my bag. I will gladly talk openly about my experience. And like I'd said, I found that stuff on Gardner, which is, you can look up Gardner's responses to misinformation and actually read a whole list of stuff. Yeah. But the information is out there. We've got these computers in our pockets. We can use it for something other than seeing if our Twitter got likes.
Yes, and also when you do the honest research, just don't look for the stuff that agrees with what you say,
Yeah, counter-research yourself. It's the best way to check for your own opinion bias.
Yes. All right, so I think we will wrap it up. Thank you all for listening. Tune in again next week, and goodbye.
Subscribe to Friends Talking Nerdy on iTunes, the Google Play Music Store, as well as Spotify. Remember to support Friends Talking Nerdy on Patreon. Goodbye, darling.